keeping up with our motto, let learning be a joy and teaching a pleasure. Here we are with the remote teaching and learning process to bridge the gap. Happy learning, students.
Welcome, dear students. Today we are going to meet very strange people in this lesson. The name of the lesson is The Adventures of Gulliver. Subject English Prose for Standard 5. This lesson is an extract from an interesting book called Gullivers Travels, written by a well-known English writer, Jonathan Swift. This is an imaginary story. The main character in this lesson is Gulliver, who worked as a surgeon on ships. He always liked to go on voyages. While returning from his voyage, on the ship the Antelope, a violent storm sank his ship and he swam to save his life. He fell asleep and late in the evening he found himself marooned in a strange land. That was the land of Lilliput. And who were the strange people he met? They were the Lilliputians who lived in the island of Lilliput. Let us hear from Gulliver what happens next. The meaning of voyage is a long journey, especially by ship. Marooned means left in a place from which you cannot escape. Adventure means an unusual, daring activity. Gulliver meets the Lilliputians. Let us hear from him. I tried to get up from the ground, but I could not move. I was lying on my back. Then I found that my arms and feet were held down to the ground with strings. My hair, which was long, was held down in the same way. Thousands of strings had been passed across my body, so that I could not move any part of me, but could only lie there on my back looking up at the sky. In a little time, I felt something live moving on my foot. Then it came over my body and up to my face. Turning my eyes down as much as I could, I saw a man. He was not half a foot high. By his dress, he seemed to be a soldier. Then there came 40 more following the first. I was so much surprised that I gave a great cry. Then they all ran back in great fear, and some of them were hurt in jumping down from my side onto the ground. Surprised means a feeling caused by something unexpected. Seemed means looked. Strings means very thick threads twisted together. Let us see what does this paragraph talk about. Gulliver found himself tied up from head to toe with strings to the ground. He couldn't move his body. Eventually, he found that some short people were moving on his body. So he gave a great cry. Children, do you know where he landed up? He landed up in a place called Lilliput, and the people living there were called Lilliputians. They were very short, not even half a foot tall. That is why they found Gulliver so strange and unusual creature. They thought he would harm them, so they tied him up to the ground. Let us continue the story. Gulliver attempts to pull free. After pulling very hard, I got one arm up from the ground. I also raised my head. This gave me great pain, for many of the hair were pulled out. I put out my hand to catch some of the little men, but they ran away before I could close my hand on them. Then I heard a noise and felt a pricking in my hand like that of 1,000 needles. I found that they were shooting arrows at me. I was afraid for my eyes. I put my hand over my face. After this, I thought that the wisest thing to do was to lie quiet till night. I thought that then, my hand being free, I could quickly set free the rest of my body. Soon a platform was raised, and an important looking man gave a long speech. From his gestures, I guessed that he was trying to tell me that they would not harm me if I did as they told. I too replied with gestures that I would remain quiet. I also told them that I was hungry. Gestures means movements of parts of body to express an idea or meaning. Here, wisest thing means the best thing. In this paragraph, we come to know that after repeated attempts, also he couldn't free himself. So, he thought that it is the wisest thing to keep quiet and obey them. Let us see what Gulliver says further. Gulliver eats a giant meal. At once, 100 men climbed up onto my body and marched up to my mouth, carrying food. The bread was as small as bullets, so I ate 2 or 3 loaves at a time, and cries of surprise rose from the Lilliputians that I could eat so quickly and so much. The Lilliputians were no longer afraid of me. They danced upon my body and ran to and fro. I could have caught at least 40 of them with my hands and thrown them down. But I remembered my promise to remain quiet. Indeed, I was surprised at their bravery, for I must have seemed the greatest giant in the world. Later, I was taken to the city where the king lived. A great cart was made by joining many carts. 900 men worked for 3 hours to put me onto the cart, which was drawn by 1,500 of the king's finest horses. The city was just half a mile away, but the journey took almost a full day. The paragraph tells us that though Gulliver seemed the greatest giant to the tiny Lilliputians, they were brave enough to feed him, and Gulliver was really surprised at their bravery. Let us see, where was Gulliver taken? Gulliver's New Home. The king came out to meet me. He came near and looked at me, but it was not thought safe for him to climb up on me. At the place where the cart stopped, there was an old church. It was the largest building in the whole country. For certain reasons, it had not been used as a church for many years. It had now been made ready for me to use as my house. The great door on the north was 4 feet high and 2 feet wide. So, I could go into it by going down on my hand. One of the feet was set to a great ring on the end of many strong strings, so that I could not get away, but could only walk some distance outside my door. The country outside looked like a garden. After some days, the king and his people were convinced that I would not harm them. So, after I agreed to keep certain orders of the king, I was allowed to move around. Let me summarize this. As Gulliver obeyed them, now the Lilliputians are not afraid of Gulliver. They thought of shifting him to the biggest building of the country, but it was too small for Gulliver. They let him to move around after he agreed to keep certain orders. Moving on, Gulliver visits the city and the queen. As soon as I was set free, I asked if I might see the city. The king was pleased to let me do this. Orders were given to all the people to remain in their houses. I then stepped over the wall and went very carefully along the two largest streets. All the windows were full of faces looking out at me, and large numbers of people were standing on the tops of the houses. The king's house was just at the place where the two great streets met. There was a beautiful garden on all sides of it. Lying down in the garden, I put my eye to the windows. The rooms inside were very beautiful. In one room, I saw the queen and some of the young princes. They were greatly pleased by my visit. Let us review the grammatical aspects of this paragraph. The past tense form of meet is met. The feminine gender of prince is princess. Largest, great, beautiful, and young are the adjectives in this paragraph. In the last paragraph of this lesson, we come to know that Gulliver adjusted with the Lilliputians, and even the Lilliputians did not trouble him. Will Gulliver remain in Lilliput for a long time? Will he be able to go back to his country, England? How did Gulliver help the Lilliputians further? If you want to know answers for the above questions, read the book Gullivers Travels, written by Jonathan Swift. Thank you, students. See you soon.